started talking with Lori Dekker of Cisco about participating in this event, I was immediately entranced, because I'm the kind of guy who gets entranced, by the way that the company not only developed and used its own customer ID starting several years ago, but the ways in which they deployed it across platforms to piggyback off of their other people's platforms in very creative ways. There's a lot more to it than that, as Lori's going to tell us, and I want to give her the time to do that, but it's something I really thought worth sharing here. Lori is the Global Programmatic Media Lead at Cisco. She is one of the true veterans of the programmatic space. It's a who's who of programmatic that she's worked for, Cadrian, Rubicon, Crux, before coming to Cisco, and she's with us today. Lori, how are you doing?
Hey, Steve.
There she is.
Here I am.
There you are. Is your video on?
My video is not able to be launched.
Okay.
You know,
that's right. You're coming to us from far away with very bad bandwidth. So we're going to do this as an audio and slideshow presentation, right?
Correct. And you know, I'm not going to make a comment about the video conference for that, but you know, this is the other thing that we're very proud of course, at Cisco is our WebEx. So I'm here to actually share. So
okay.
Let me
I'm going to go off and let you share your deck.
All right.
All right.
Here we go.
Okay, it's working.
It's working.
Yep.
All right. So we wanted to talk a little bit about what Cisco's been doing, and especially the long game that we have around first-party data and the way that we got started and how we're looking at all of these changes that are going off and everything that was covered in those surveys. And I really think this is what we've heard forever. First-party data is your most valuable data. We hear this over and over and over again, but we've really been able at Cisco to create some equity into our first-party data and to really leverage it, not only in media campaigns, but across all of digital marketing. And I kind of want to level set a little bit here too, because I can't go to a programmatic conference without people asking what Cisco is doing at a programmatic conference. And I really want to be clear, this is not just a B2B story. This isn't just something that only B2B advertisers or brands can leverage. This is not a magic bullet. It's not one size fits all. It's something that gets tailored and customized for every single brand and every single business. And it's also not unreachable. It's not unattainable to be able to put some value together into your digital properties. So let's talk a little bit about what it is. This is about rethinking the role of identity and the way that we actually track and measure and build audiences. So this is kind of about the next step in the next generation. So let me talk a little bit about Cisco's approach and talk about where we started. And where we actually started was at the end. I know that sounds silly, but you've got to kind of look at the way that you want to report out success. What are you trying to measure? What tells you that your campaigns are working? What tells you that your media is working? And the rest of your executions. And I really think it starts with understanding the company objectives. Everyone is trying to look for either their next new customer. Everyone's looking to either retain or grow the business that they have. And you've got to think through that story. What am I really trying to get before I build anything else? Then, of course, you've got your media goals, your media KPIs. This is the way that you measure and justify to your CFO, the way that the money is being invested in media. This is the way that your agency might plan and execute. You've got to have your own center of truth through your ad server on how you are measuring that the media is working. But that doesn't mean that I actually have to set it up in a DSP platform. I'm really looking at everything in the programmatic channel to fit those first two goals. But I report back to the organization in a way that makes sense. So this is really kind of critical if you're just starting out or you're thinking through your first party data. You've got to plan for the insights and the reporting that you ultimately want to generate, how you show that success. And this was really important for me when I joined Cisco, because we don't sell to individuals. Cisco sells to companies. So you've got to think through, how are you reporting back to the organization the result for everything that you do in media? So here was kind of the difference here too. Cisco actually has media experts in-house. And I think this is kind of a critical place to start. You want to bring in true media experts. You want to bring in people that have a breadth of experience and that can evaluate from in-house. We do have an external agency that we still use, but we're allowed to have a different conversation this way. We can innovate. We can talk through a little bit more about what Cisco is really trying to do. So what our remit really started out with was understanding that path to purchase. And the one thing that we learned, we have most incredible data scientists at Cisco. It's exceptional what this company does to embrace innovation. And they really understood what happens when someone engages. Now, where we might differ from other brands, we know the website's a critical component. Nobody buys any one of our products without engaging on the site, without configuring a network, without looking at security products or cloud products. It is a critical path to purchase, is the website. We also want to be able to connect all of the paid media activity to account-based reporting. And that goes back to that last slide, which is to understand what is the way that the company measures success, not just the media team, but the company. And this is where the challenges really came in. You've got to spend time actually educating the company on the value and the privacy compliance of tagging. Tagging is a vital part for any company that has been concerned. Do your due diligence, help your legal team understand why that tagging is important, why having that first party signal through your media tagging is critical. We learned that engagement activity. So we had tracked every single action on Cisco. We built a dashboard of engagement points, so many visits, so many downloads of content, different views, different engagements with our forum. But we also found out that it really didn't match what a media platform could actually do. We've also got long purchase cycles. This is not an impulse buy that you pick up at a checkout counter and buy an infrastructure for your company. So we had to deal with the fact that Cisco's business model had these long purchase cycles with multiple buyers. So what we really started to do was we started establishing a naming convention and started connecting some of those site conversions. If the website's really important, let's take a look at how we connect that to our media tech stack. And we were able to do this through naming conventions, of being able to put identifiers, things that were tracked through click behaviors on sites. We took those same IDs so we could follow the entire path from every impression and view through that we had to site traffic, engagement, email marketing, all the way through. We worked with data engineers. We made sure we got some engineers that could help us do the data joins and connect a lot of the technology. We established this baseline, and I think this is really critical. You really want to make sure that you understand who your customer is. So we understood also what our media activity could do in over 70 countries globally. We had a standard approach. We negotiated complete and full measurement and transparency. With our media agency, we made sure that we established that going forward. We remained privacy compliant. We used anonymous identifiers. And this is something very unique to Cisco, is that we also created our own ID. And I'll get into that in a moment. So what's the result of all of this? We could connect all of the internal customer databases with external data sets. So again, plan for the reporting you want. Look for a way to join your data set. We had a foundational understanding of the digital marketing impact we were having. We had zero reliance on any non-transparent or non-consented third-party data, which I know for a lot of you who've worked like I have all across the industry in different verticals, everything from CPG to tech, is to understand that we don't actually use any third-party data. And we're actually one step closer to future-proofing. So let's talk about how we build some signals. And I think this is really a critical component that people who rely on someone else to label who your audience is. You can infer a lot about your audience by what they do on your website, what they do online. This is why contextual targeting is so important. This is why understanding what they read. You can infer a behavior by the different areas of the website. And this is one of the things that we did through our media tagging footprint, is we made sure that we understood what a current buyer of a Cisco product, someone who is actively researching and configuring, what do they look like? And how can I use that to model or create a way to expand? I could use this through data sets online, is look at actual behaviors, contextual consumption of content. This is the way that you start building your best in class signal of who your audience could be. I think the other is that you've got to ignore some of the tech limitations. This is why you bring media experts in-house. You need someone who understands what the technology can and cannot do. And your tag management platform is actually your friend if you want to build out signals. One of the things that we learned at Cisco is that we learned that nobody buys coming once. We know that someone who's truly, truly interested in buying a network or as our core audience, we know is they come back to the site multiple times. But a tech platform can't really handle that, not to the level that we had our own internal understanding of our customers. So we use actually our tag management platform to set those rules. It conditionally fires a tag that I call return visit. And in that way, I'm able to feed a signal into all of my bidding platforms to understand exactly the audience that's more likely to buy our product. I think the other thing to do is to kind of embrace directional identity. You don't really want to just hit a certain audience. That's never the goal of any campaign that I've ever worked on. It's never just to hit IT decision makers. It's always to get an IT decision maker, for example, who buys, or not just someone who is labeled as in market for auto. You want someone who's in market for auto that's more likely to buy from you. So what you really have to look at is the behavior and the responses that you set up. You can't know who that individual is unless you start building in value into your digital properties and you give people an incentive to log in. That's why companies like Amazon and Facebook and LinkedIn, Google, there's deterministic data of people who are logged in. Create that value for people, but also for those people who aren't logged in or that audience isn't built up yet. Look for those behaviors that are critical components of what you're trying to do. And that's going to set the basis for everything that you do to expand how you find that net new customer. I think the other piece that Steve mentioned up front is this unique identifier idea. Now, a lot of brands, a lot of companies, a lot of agencies have become reliant on their tech stack. And I can't tell you how many conferences where I've seen conversations about how MarTech and ad tech don't really talk. Everyone is frenemies, that Lumascape is getting awfully crowded. And one of the things that we started doing was we started bridging identity barriers. Cisco built its own ID in 2006. And it was something that it was just part of our fabric. It's something that persisted. But until our media team came on board, one of the things that we started doing is we saying, well, we need to have this same identifier linking to all of our media. So what we really did was we looked at that first party identifier. So every time a tag fires, we pass our ID of that anonymous traffic. The second thing that we did was we then tied this to naming conventions. Naming conventions are the most boring, most ridiculous thing to try to enforce. It is difficult, it is not fun, but you do this one thing right and all of your reporting comes together. So this is about creation and governance. This is identifying at that user level all of the impressions that I serve that result in a sale for Cisco. I think it's being able to have that conversation around tagging and tagging all of your owned properties. If you start creating this connection between what you have where people interact with your brand, even if you're CPG, and this is something that you're dealing with the partner and you're onboarding from loyalty programs, being able to properly organize and connect it to the way that you're doing those first two things are going to be critical to do to doing that reporting that you want to do. And I think finally, this came up as one of those elements everyone's concerned about, but this is critical: transparency and privacy compliance. You want to develop those partnerships with your agency. You want to negotiate to make sure that you're getting back clear transparency. You want to start denying places that are looking to take your advertising budget. You want to make sure that they are being fully transparent with who you're actually serving to, and choose your media partners based on their deterministic data, how they're identifying people, the value that they bring. And all of these things together are actually going to bridge these identity barriers and start helping you create valuable first-party data. Now, the way that we do this in Programmatic specifically, and we do this at the same consistency in the smallest countries that we have in Europe, to the United States, to Japan, to what we do in China. But this is really how the industry right now uses Programmatic. They look at it as reach and scale. They look at it as efficiency or CPA. They look at it as simply audience targeting, which is where all of this third-party data comes into place. But what we've really done is we started shifting a lot of the conversion goals. We started looking at it more as that business opportunity. And we did that by unifying this tech stack through that custom identity matching. So if every time that my ad server tag fires on Cisco and I pass a Cisco ID, that data comes back to me in my data transfer feed. I get that in my log level data coming through, and I can also connect the business opportunities to every single ad that I serve. Then I start working internally about educating and separating out the idea that who someone is as a person, as an audience persona that your marketing is trying to reach, is not the same as what a media persona is. Who we are as a person. You've got to understand that persona to be able to write the right content, to create the right ad, but it's not how we behave online. And you've got to have that educational distinction when you execute. It's not the label, it's the behavior. And this is where we started separating a lot of what the DSP can actually track from the way that we report back to the organization, whether or not this campaign has actually been successful, whether my targeting is good, whether the creative is good, whether the website content is all helping drive towards that sale. And this is really kind of how we've overcome all of those limitations of why is Cisco doing programmatic? How are we doing it effectively? We're taking it to another level because we have a better understanding of where that engagement happens on Cisco.com. So let's talk about how you can report then anonymous. Just to give you an example of what that looks like. For every customer that we have, I have a way to tie at an impression level where that engagement is coming through, because I'm using my own anonymous identifier of someone on Cisco.com. And this is where you've got to take a look at your own business model. Where does that engagement happen? Where is your touch point? How can you do that? Through the naming convention, your customer databases, is to be able to tie together the external activity to your internal data sets. And I think this is really kind of it. So just to kind of sum this up before we go into Q&A, some of the key takeaways here overall, the way that we're going to tie this all together, you really just want to create your own signals. You want to recognize what is the strongest seed that you've got. You want to calibrate your customer response. Not look at it as the number of cookies that you're hitting or the number of people in the size of a pool, but you want to start creating a signal that is of value and contributes to a sale. You want to learn more about model data. Steve mentioned veterans of the industry. I mean, I started 12 years ago when everything was using predictive models. It was not so much about this data. And this is something that every major DSP platform can do and do well, which is to do a predictive model off of your most valuable signals. So learn more about that and do that against a data set that you trust. Get your house in order. And I think this is really critical. I think you do have to make some key hires. I know I've said that a lot, but there's nothing like having someone who can translate, really translate, what is the company trying to do? Not just what's in a brief, not which is documented and given externally, but to really interpret it and translate it into an execution that makes sense. This is where the naming conventions come through. This is where the execution comes through. And then finally, it's that choosing those transparent media partners. We just want to continue to understand how this evolves, because the customer behavior will always change. Tech will always change. So you've got to be able to be flexible and start really getting into the negotiation and looking at those partners for transparency. And I think I'll end it there.
Lori, that was magnificent. Thank you so much. That was incredibly detailed and a great storyline. I really appreciate it. And again, I want to remind everybody, if you have questions, either type them into the chat window or raise your hand, and we will queue you up. Now, you mentioned especially the things that you were doing on site, and of course, site dynamics are becoming more important as first-party data becomes more important. And I think, in fact, later this morning we're going to talk to Visible about the ways in which it's relying on its own site to do more of the conversion work. But in addition to naming and tagging, were you reorganizing the site itself to accommodate the data strategy of building out signals? And how did those conversations with the web team go?
Well, it takes time, it takes patience, and it takes a lot of reinforcement. One of the great things about the global paid media team that was established at Cisco was that we were told up front, we were said that part of our job is to spend that time educating, is to make sure that you're having those conversations and you can understand how it all interacts together. Nobody is buying simply because I serve them an ad. If I reach an audience and serve them the right creative and they come to the site and get lost, it doesn't mean that your media is going to perform. You've got to be able to have those conversations and upskill a little bit to help people understand what you need from media. So there wasn't a rearrangement of anything that we were doing on Cisco. There was a lot of work already done on Cisco.com to understand which site engagements predicted when someone was ready to buy. What we really did was we adapted and worked with that team to make sure that we could create those signals that were most valuable, that could direct the way that we bought media.
Now, one of the things that really fascinated me in our previous conversations was the ways in which you're using your unique ID and piggybacking it on the ads that other platforms are serving for you. Am I getting that right? But there's a way in which you're using your unique identifier in concert with the ads that third-party platforms are serving.
Yes, yes. So this is really about establishing, for lack of a better word, a match table. When you have a partner and you allow their tag on your website and a property that you own, what we've been really doing is we've been working very transparently with our partners about passing, and it's an anonymous ID. It has no value. It has no PII to anyone outside of Cisco. But having that relationship where you think through, and it's not just in advertising. We do this with our MarTech site analytics. We do this with email marketing. We do this with events that we put on, is that we're making sure that we've got a way to pass through a value through a JavaScript tag. Now, sometimes you get to be a company the size of Cisco, you worry about InfoSec, but again, you learn to help that legal team understand how this is compliant and how you are helping the company avoid any kind of risk with putting this together. So a lot of what we focused on with third party is we just look at that opportunity to match IDs. So when their tag fires on our site, I pass them an ID. And when we ask for the data back, I get back all of my identifiers for what's actually been served. That's what's unique about what we do.
What we have a question from Matthew Levine. Not every company has the resources available to Cisco. How would a smaller company approach taking some of these actions?
Yeah, it's good to work at Cisco for all of the tech and innovation. The way that I would start is start looking at other ways that you can put an investment into data engineering. There's a lot of firms, there's a lot of agencies that will do this work. It's easier to get approvals for that instead of doing headcount or bringing internal. But again, I think if you have a media person in-house, I think that's your first investment. And then I think it's really establishing where you can get these retainers and these contractors to help you with that first organizational structure. I understand it's not an easy thing, but if you start small, even with just your media naming and that tagging footprint, I think the rest of it then is making key investments along the way.
And let me ask one final quick question about media persona versus marketing persona. Dig into that a little bit more, because it's a really interesting concept. And I just want to make sure that we sort of clarify the way you're thinking about the difference between those two ideas.
Sure. Well, a typical marketing persona that you learn about in school is always a demographic. IT decision makers are male, 25 to 34 primarily. They into video gaming and long walks on the beach, whatever it might be. That's the persona that you build about who your target audience might be. It doesn't mean that you should target them in media the way that they live in real life. Not everybody responds the same way to advertising. And this, to me, is the most beautiful thing about programmatic, is the machine learning. The machine, all of these platforms will learn about that media persona, about the response as it relates to your company and to the ad that you serve. It's not just about reaching an audience by how they're classified or by a demo. It's taking these signals and using that DSP platform for everything that it's worth, which is let it find the media response and figure out the behavior that's important to you. So the difference is thinking of who they are so that you can write the right ad and the right creative and the right content. That's your marketing persona. The media persona is what the platforms learn in the response to that ad and the further engagement with your brand.
Lori Dekker of Cisco, thank you so much for joining us, giving us so much detail and working under taxing bandwidth conditions. Where you're up in Canada, aren't you?
I'm up in Canada right now. Yes.
We keep hearing that everybody has better bandwidth than we do down in the States.
Oh, you would think.
Lori,
thank you so much for having me.